I think we're recording. Yes, you got it? Okay, great. We can move on. So you are considering a postdoc. We have 4 panelists today, and I'm going to have them each introduce themselves briefly. But first, we are going to start with a bit of engagement. So we know that it's hard in the virtual world to really meet people. So we wanted to build in a little bit of time for small groups. So you're going to have about 8 minutes to introduce yourself to the group. And we ask that the panelists introduce themselves last within the group. And then we'll go into the moderated session where where we've prepared a few questions for the panelists. And then we'll have time for the audience to have any questions and answer. During the moderated panel, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat or even raise your hand. I don't think my questions are the only ones that are important, so we'd love to hear from the audience throughout. But just know that there's going to be dedicated time as well. So as we prepare to get into our breakout rooms to introduce yourselves, we just wanted to give you a little bit of a format to help you think through it. We just want you to identify your name, your pronouns, if you are a student or a postdoc, and what your unit is. So what department you're in, maybe even the lab, and then just indicate what kind of job or career you're interested in. And then we'll have the panelists go last, as we mentioned. And then we also want you to say, what is your biggest concern about getting from here to the next phase in your career, if you feel comfortable to share that. Does anybody have any questions before we move in? Right, Susan, are you all set? One more minute. Oh, I can do. Yeah, so it'll be fun. Each person will be about a minute. You ready to go? Great. See you shortly. Welcome back. I hope you had a moment to get to know one another in the breakout rooms. And we are going to head back into session, and I'm going to start with introducing our panelists for everybody. So we have Dr. Brently, who is at Cornell, or going to be at Cornell, I believe. Yes. Dr. Benish, who's at the EPA, Dr. Pontage, who's at NIST, and Dr. Toussaint, who is at the University of South Carolina. And we're looking forward to hearing from each of them. So if you don't mind, we're going to go in that order. And we're going to start off with just a quick question. Hold on, I will get to it in a second. Loving having it. So we wanted to have each panelist quickly describe the work that you're currently doing and what job strategies did you utilize to land your position. So if we could start with Dr. Brently, that would be great.
So I applied for, there was a fellowship, what is the organization? I'm like totally blanking on it. But I applied for a fellowship that allowed it basically, since there was a shortage of computer science faculty hiring, this fellowship opened up to give you a buffer of 1 or 2 years, so you can still apply to an academic job. But the catch was that you're supposed to find a host, and you and the host write a proposal about what you want to work on. And my proposal won. So the problem that I'm working on is that ranking systems are very big nowadays. So, when you go to Amazon and you search for something, it's ranking items. When you go to Google, it's ranking items. And when you go to Spotify and you listen to music, it's ranking items. But the catch is that when you rank items, and if the ranking algorithm is not great, then you get sort of this winner take all, where the ranking system ranks you a song, and that song someone likes, and then the ranking system is like, oh, well, people like this song, so I'll keep giving that recommendation over and over and over again. And now, because these markets affect people's lives, because of music, it's how people generate revenue. There are artists that are maybe you also may like, that may not actually get recommended because these recommendation systems are not fair. So I'm working on learning to rank in just markets.
Thank you for that. Thank you for your work, actually, because I'm like, I need a better array of song choices when I go to these searches. So thank you. That hit home. Dr. Benish, would you like to share a little bit about yourself and how you got to your position?
Yeah, sure. So I finished my PhD in November of 2020, and it was still, pandemic time, and I could not really find jobs, and I was kind of panicked. And so in my head, I was like, do I need to do a postdoc? I have no idea. I don't want to teach ever. That is not in the cards for me. So does a postdoc make sense? Because in my mind, you do a postdoc to get an academic position. And so I just started Googling and looking around and came across federal position postdocs, and soon found out that many of those are on this kind of fixed timeline or schedule. NASA, of course, is down the road from College Park, but a lot of people from my program went to NASA. And so I didn't even really consider NASA for some reason. I was really interested in NOAA, particularly in Boulder, but the timing wasn't going to work out. I was going to defend way earlier than the funding would be available. And so I came across a federal contracting postdoc position, which is what I ended up taking. And it's called ORISE, or the Oak Ridge Institute for Science and Education. And it's technically money through the Department of Energy. And they have a huge listings of internships, fellowships for masters, bachelors, postdocs. And the website portal itself is very overwhelming. There's a lot of different resources and positions that aren't easy to navigate. But that's how I ended up coming across my position. Eventually, I did realize that my PhD advisor was emailing me some of those Intellect ORISE information. So maybe I would have come across it as well. EPA does have federal postdocs as well, but I didn't become aware of those until I started a postdoc position. And the benefits of being a postdoc in the federal agency versus the contracting is usually the pay is a little bit better. It counts towards years of federal service. So my 1 year as a contracting postdoc did not count towards years of federal service towards retirement or towards a higher pay. And so that was something I didn't realize until recently. So I was a postdoc in the research side of EPA in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina, for about a year. I ended in April of 2022. And that research was really focused on kind of forwarding what my PhD research was on. So instead of looking at air quality from observations, I was looking at air quality in a 3D chemical transport model. So it was a little bit different. And then I'm just going to briefly talk about how I found my federal scientist position, since it's kind of this whole story is when I took this contracting postdoc position, my kind of end goal was to end up in the federal government. And so early on my first day of my postdoc, my mentor told me that a postdoc is temporary and that I should be looking for jobs now, which was kind of crazy to have told on your first day to keep looking for jobs. But I think it really is true, especially if you're not interested in academic positions, because the timeline for federal employee job searches are very short, and they often depend on where we are in the administrative cycle and the election cycle. And so if we're close to an election year, a lot of offices will kind of hold off and wait and see, at least from my experiences. So I ended up setting up USA job like email alerts for things that were very, very broad, and I would have to go through. So every day I would scroll through USA jobs and try to find something. I thought I would be most interested in a physical scientist position because that's what my degree's in, but I would have been eligible for a lot more. So definitely don't kind of narrow yourself into an area. So I eventually got my current position, and it's now in the policy office of EPA. And I was honestly very surprised that they were interested in me because it's all about energy sector and helping provide data analysis for rulemaking in the power sector. And so I've had to now I'm becoming a technical expert in turbine design and, things like my PhD allowed me to have a big, broad picture of air quality and how things work on that kind of scale. But now I'm really into this detailed, more policy focused role. So I'll stop there and let the next person talk.
Great, thank you so much. Dr. Patange.
Hi, I'm Simona Patange. I'm a postdoc with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, which is a federal agency that's within the Department of Commerce. And so I am a postdoc with the NIST genome editing program here. And my group leader, who's my postdoc mentor, she leads the NIST Genome Editing Consortium, which is 43 member organizations from academia, industry, and government all working together to develop standards for genome editing. So as a postdoc, I coordinate projects for the consortium, and I also do internal research here at NIST related to CRISPR-Cas9 genome editing projects. So for my graduate work, it was a partnership between University of Maryland and the NIH. So I found that I really wanted to be a scientist. I wasn't necessarily sure of being a PI, but that being a government scientist was something I was very much interested in. So I was lucky that in 2019, I had a chance to go to a lot of conferences in person. So I was looking out for postdocs related to my field, and I did follow up with some PIs virtually in spring of 2020 while I was preparing to graduate. But my one advice would be visibility. Just being able to attend conferences, whether it's in person or virtual, talk to people. A concern that came up in the breakout session I was in is, well, what if your PI is not super supportive, or, you don't feel like you can network through your PI to get your next job? And that's just fine. We are so highly qualified, so specialized that, don't worry about that because your work speaks for itself. If you find a job you're interested in and that supervisor finds that you're a good match for what they're looking for, that's all it takes. So I actually found my job at NIST without looking for it. I didn't realize that they did much work in biology, but I happened to give a talk at a symposium late in 2019 where some NIST scientists saw me and they thought, like, wow, we should recruit her to our division and be postdoc here. So one of them approached me and actually told me about the NIST postdoc program and how to apply for that. And so it was one of the things that was kind of lower on my list because I didn't know too much about NIST, very unfamiliar with the structure, which was very different from academia. So it was kind of lower on my list, but I went ahead and applied and I got the offer during, the pandemic in 2020 when other PIs were, putting things on hold saying, we're interested in you, but let's wait until your paper's further along towards publication. Let's see what our budget, operating status is like in the lab. So I decided to go ahead with my NIST postdoc, and I'm enjoying it. And it's a 2-year postdoc, which is nice and short, and I will have the opportunity to stay at NIST if I want after that. So I would echo what Sarah said, that, your postdoc is for you to decide what you want to do with the rest of your life. If you want to be a PI, put in those 5-6 years for high impact research, working towards a high impact paper, great. But if not, that's fine. Use that time to enjoy the skills that you have acquired without the stresses of being a graduate student. Just enjoy that time to do your research and also use that time to figure out what you want to do afterwards. And in the chat, I'm going to post the particular fellowship program that I was a part of. It's the NRC Research Association Associateship, which is funded by the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. So this is a national postdoc fellowship that is offered across multiple national laboratories. So there you can see the application process, find openings, and apply through that system.
Thank you so much. That was great advice. And thank you for sharing those links. Dr. Toussaint?
Hi, everyone, and thank y'all for having me here today. Can y'all hear me okay? So currently, my title is very complicated, or maybe I'm making it complicated. So I was a postdoctoral research scientist, but I still sort of flexibly use the title because I have already earned my doctorate. So I'm technically in the postdoctoral period. But as Sarah and Simona nicely put it, day one in your postdoc, it's like, okay, what am I going to do next? Because you know it's a temporary period. And I was hired on with a one-year contract with the opportunity for extension. However, very early on, I knew I did not want to remain in the postdoc. That may just be unique to my experience. I had already spent about 15 years in health policy, health advocacy, and health services research. So I do feel like the postdoc, I think maybe someone already said it, is kind of a continuation of your PhD without being the student. So you kind of get to hone the skills you already had. And so very early on, I was like, okay, I already have these skills, but I do not want to be at a computer all day. I will say I was in a very supportive lab. No offense to any of the fellows that are here today, those that don't go by he, him, or anything like that, but it was very nice to be in a lab that was all lady scientists. I had never experienced that, especially with my heavy background, being in health policy. Sarah, you were speaking my language there. You are an expert when you were talking about being called as a technical expert and scientist to inform policy. Yes, I was like, I wanted to scream like, yes, we need more scientists helping to make evidence-based policy decisions. So that is, I've been in lobbying advocacy for a very, very long time. And that was one of the things that clicked very early on in my postdoc was like, oh my God, I miss talking to people. I miss talking about policy. Data and science is amazing, but I was like, I cannot sit at a computer all day doing data. I'm glad I have the skills. Someone should be estimating mathematical models using economic theory. That person is not me. Maybe my cohort mate, Aita, who is here, who said, hey, and I'm definitely excitedly, hey, back girl. She knows we spent hours doing all the maths, all the economics, which is fun and great. I love numbers. Most of my policy experiences with Senate Committee on Finance and doing budgeting and appropriations and all those things. So I very, very much love it. But unlike Sarah, who's also honest with that, I think it was Sarah who said she does not want to teach. I think that is an amazing self-awareness. I love to teach. I taught my teddy bears since I was like 5. So I knew for me, like I said, not sitting behind a computer all day. I know I wanted to be in the classroom, talking to people, some type of mentorship, like community service. I love mentoring students, but like I said, I love doing research also, but I definitely know I need to be somewhere where I want to teach. And so that's why I've never really looked at the government before, but if someone asks me that question later, I'll come back around and talk about a new opportunity I'm actually entertaining at the VA because they actually have some type of faculty programs and roles. So I'll get back around to that. But my current research, so I transitioned from my postdoc in December into being a research affiliate with the center. And so like I said, I love the team there. Everyone's super fantastic. My main mentor, the PI for the lab, is a cancer epidemiologist, and she also does a lot of geospatial stuff. So I actually got to take her GIS course in the fall and learn how to do using shapefiles, is doing some basic drawing up some maps and different things for using demographic data. And so one of the projects that I got to work on that's actually published now in Health Affairs is the problem of the color line, which is kind of paying homage to W.E.B. Du Bois. He was a sociologist, those who may be familiar with his work, about a century ago, and was one of the first to link social conditions to health problems. And so a lot of our work kind of paid tribute to that. And we did a lot of spatial analyses in relation to where minoritized racial and ethnic groups live in relation to healthcare services. So that was a work with them that I was very, very proud of. And so my mentor and PI there has continued to present on that. And she's actually moving on to another institution. And so they were super supportive from day one about me making sure it's a good fit and what I want, what I thought I could need, and how they could best use my skills, which we didn't really find a space for my policy and advocacy skills. So that didn't really kind of fit, even though I know they wanted to add it to their lab. And so I think that goes back to self-awareness, as everyone already stated, is like knowing what you want, and then also being a space that allows you to explore that. They were very upfront about this is a postdoc period. It doesn't have to be a year. Don't feel like you have to have everything all figured out. You know, it was basically as long as you're doing the work and you're contributing and you're great here. They were super supportive of me applying for grant funding and opportunities, me doing different research projects. I should also be transparent. My husband is an academic also. And so the way I got this role was when he sent in his package for an offer at this institution, they asked about me because he had mentioned me in his interview, like, oh, my spouse is from South Carolina and she's earning her doctorate. Would y'all have any opportunities for her? And so what the law school did, they sent out my CV to the entire university. And so the School of Public Health, they were interested and they found a good fit for me. Their outgoing postdoc had just took a faculty position in Iowa. And so they were interviewing for postdocs. And so got the interview and they thought I was a great fit. And so, like I said, it was for a while until I realized very much that this wasn't what I wanted to do forever. So I can go on and on, but I'd rather people ask their questions about what they actually want to know, because I could share so much. But thank y'all for having me.
Thank you so much for that. And I think that really speaks to a number of folks who are, you know, having partners that are also academics and like how to navigate that. So thank you for bringing that up. All of you, I'm just sitting here like, oh yes, I love this information. But I will move on to the next question. And again, feel free to put questions in the chat as we continue. So kind of circling back to the skills, and each of you mentioned like really thinking about how you're honing your skills. So what are some of the skills that are most important to your work every day, like right at this point? And how did your doctoral training prepare you for this work? Econometrics. You did mention that. Feel free to unmute and speak. It doesn't have to be in a specific
y'all,
order.
I talk too much, so I'm just trying to wait for somebody to just type it out. But econometrics, like I said, it's estimating mathematical models using economic theory, and a lot of it, especially in healthcare, you're adjusting large data sets that have a large number of zeros, because usually it's a small number of individuals using all the healthcare and a lot of people not using anything at all. And so I underestimated that, I think, a lot during my doctoral training, is how much they need people just to weight data and work with biostatisticians and do all the things to manipulate it and figure it out, all the assumptions you have to make, the different testing and just different modeling. And like I said, it's fun, but definitely I would say that's probably the biggest takeaway from my PhD, just soft people skills, but also the very, very hard research econometric skills.
Great. And feel free to elaborate on those quote unquote soft skills, because I think that's one thing that all of us are getting that are important in the PhD process. And so if you feel free to highlight that to any of the panelists, and then we can get to the question. In the
just
chat.
Working, the soft skill that I'm referring to, I guess to be more specific, is just talking to people everywhere. I talk to people everywhere all the time, all at once. I don't care what somebody might look like, because you don't know who people ever are. I think somebody here, I think I worked with Nate in a cancer lab for a year and a half, if that's the Nate that I remember. But I think I got connected to that lab. I don't even remember, just talking to somebody. Oh, hey, Nate, he said, yeah, that's it. Just talking to somebody, I don't even remember. And the project was awesome. I ended up with a paper through that lab at UMD. And then she wrote letters of recommendation for me for other things and connected me to mental health, from doing cancer work to doing mental health. But funny enough, my postdoc, my mentor ended up being backed with cancer. But my dissertation was focused on mental health. So I would say the soft skill of just talking to people, introducing yourself. I'd rather talk too much than not talk at all. So I literally, most of my CV is just littered with experiences that I just said yes to from someone I met, whether it was a class, getting to travel to Tanzania to work with the CDC there, doing microbiology and infectious disease work. I don't do that now, but I did it post my master's just from talking to one of my professors, and it was a CDC lab cap program. I don't know if that program even exists anymore, but I did it. And here I am. So I always tell students and people that are interested in career pathways, just have fun, say yes to stuff. You're young or you're older, wherever you're at in your life, just say yeah and just see if you like it or not. I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen? You're not a good fit, you don't like it, you move on. So
That's right. Say yes and then let go if you need to.
I can expand on some of the other skills that, I mean, data analysis, everything data, yes, I completely agree with that, is probably like the core of what my position is now, but I'll just add communication. Pretty much in every government job on USA Jobs, the last like core skill is written and verbal communication. Like that will pretty much always be in there. And so like in grad school, I was able to work on, written communication through academic, published manuscripts, which I don't have to do those anymore. So if you don't like publishing, there is a way out. And also just like verbal communication. So I participated in the 3-minute thesis competition in grad school, which was awesome. I loved it. And it allowed me, when I was applying for these positions, to really have solid, concrete ways to prove that I was good at communicating at some level that made me stick out maybe a little bit more than, listing all my publications.
Great. Okay, we do have a question in the chat, so I'm happy to pose it. What are the pros and cons of taking a direct hire position in a government lab as opposed to doing a postdoc first?
I can go ahead and answer that question from my perspective at NIST, because we have postdocs that commonly come in through the NRC fellowship. In fact, that's the primary way that a postdoc comes to the NIH. Rarely they will be hired on as a direct hire, which we call term positions. At least at NIST, the pros of doing a postdoc is that it is considered prestigious to get this NRC fellowship. It is a national fellowship. It is competitive. So if you get it, that's great. And a lot of NIST scientists have come through that way. However, you're not on the books, you're not a part of the NIST budget for that fellowship because you are externally funded by the National Academy. So when your 2 years are up, your position, if you choose to stay and your division wants to keep you on, is actually an open posting on usajobs.gov, right? So of course it is crafted in a way that you are the best fit for the job, but it is still an open position. And the hiring process in the government does take a long time. And I know that some postdocs just found that uncertainty too much to deal with, right? So during that time, they interviewed with other positions, found something that was a good fit and left. So I'd say that's the pros and cons, at least at NIST. Having a fellowship is prestigious, but you're kind of dependent on the budgeting, at that 2-year mark of what happens to your job. So
I'll just add that typically a federal position will pay you more than a postdoc, and usually comes with maybe better benefits. My contracting postdoc definitely didn't carry the same prestige, and the health insurance that I had to pay was insane. So the money side of it matters too, because we're all in different circumstances there. So don't make that feel like you shouldn't consider those things.
Blessing, can I jump in?
Sure.
Sarah, you just made me think of something. I'm looking at Kiante here, and I know as a computer scientist, the world could have been your oyster. Why did you decide to do a postdoc? We've heard all the reasons from the other panelists, prestige, opportunities, the real joy of working as a scientist in the federal government. But what was that like for you? I'm sure you had companies knocking on your door.
I decided to do a postdoc because I just didn't know exactly what I want to do next. So I come from, like, I worked for the federal government for 7 years. So I've already worked in, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go to industry or academia. And a lot of my friends, like everyone went on the job market, and my friends who went to industry, like 2 months into the job, they're like, oh, I want a new position. I was like, it's only been 2 months. It's like, I'm not doing any research anymore. I'm just doing product focused work. And it's like, I can do it, but it's not fun. Like I'm not having fun. So I've had, and then there's other friends who like didn't go to industry. They did a postdoc, and at least for that like small window of time, they felt like they had complete freedom to like someone said, like enjoy the benefit of the skills that you learned during your PhD. And it just gave you time to like think about exactly what you want to do next. And you sort of have the experience of just collaborating with a new group of people and working on a different set of problems. So that's why I did it.
Great. I think oftentimes people assume that the grass is greener, right? So it's good to take a moment and experience maybe a little bit of a few things so that you can base it for yourself.
Yeah, there's a saying that says the grass is greener where you water it at.
Did not know that next part. There's another question in the chat, and any of you can answer, and I'm happy to answer as well, but is it common to follow a postdoc with another postdoc in your spaces? Are you familiar?
I'm only familiar with people doing that if they are certain they're going the academic route.
A friend of mine is doing that mainly because he wanted to expand like his network. Because I mean, like you're as productive as your network is sort of in academia. So during his PhD, he didn't collaborate with a lot of people. So he decided to do 2 one-year postdocs at 2 big institutions with 2 well-known professors. So he can expand his like network of people that knows him and sort of that he can work with.
In my experience here in the School of Public Health, I know people who have done it, and the reason is for money. I hate to be transparent. I was like, I can say it because it's not me, but I know those of them who said they were switching to a lab that was that had more R01 funding. And so there's a lot of stuff that I feel like I didn't know. I'm a first generation college student. I tell everybody that. I'm Gullah Geechee, grew up on a small family farm. I don't know any other Gullah Geechee scientists. If y'all do, please point them to me. And so on this side, being on the postdoc side and seeing all of the different pathways and postdoctoral workshops that I attended that were talking about money, I was like, oh man, it never ends. I have to now find money, figure out what I want to do. And so we all were talking, and some people were saying how they were going to apply for a postdoc in another lab, but within the School of Public Health, because they were R01 funded. I was in a lab, which was great, by the way, but they never had an R01 funding. And to get the T32 program, you have to have a mentor or PI who has had R01 funding. And so, and it's like a kind of the way the DC works and the government works the same way is once you're in, you're in. So those people will continue to be funded. And so I kind of felt like a stepchild a little bit that my lab we were funded, but we were funded from the Federal Office for Rural Health Policy, not the NIH, not, I feel like big academic money. And so I kind of, at the postdoc lunches, I kind of just felt like the stepchild, like everybody's in, especially exercise science here is huge. They have all the money, they have all these postdocs, they constantly have openings. I was the only postdoc in my lab, and so it was very lonely. So just, I think maybe that added to me feeling like I definitely don't want to be here either. It was nice to mentor the current PhD students and the master students. I think I even got the chance to mentor some medical students who were doing some summer projects with the lab, but it was very lonely being the only one and feeling like, oh no, we don't have any money. And like our budget is so focused on doing what the Federal Office for Rural Health Policy wants us to do. And shout out to them. I'm still doing research for them using data that they paid for. Sure, but you could see the difference automatically. So I would say one thing I could tell people is definitely follow the money and learn about different sources of funding and how that works. Ask those questions on the job market. You know, how is your lab funded? What is the primary source? And even me asking that, I didn't know what a difference that meant until I got on the other side and saw how other labs were funded and was like, oh, wait, this is an anomaly. Y'all ain't never had no R1s? Because I didn't know that. And you definitely should ask your PI that if you want to go in the academy, if that is important to you, because who you're attached to, it's just how you play the game. It matters. So I didn't want to be attached to someone either that didn't ever have R01. But she's a phenomenal researcher. I don't know why. I feel like I got to give the disclaimers one thing. I mean,
no, it's okay. And it's true. It's true. I would say, just to add on to all of this wealth of information, is I think it depends on a lot of things, right? It depends on your discipline. And it depends on what your desire is, right? So for somebody who's doing a series of 1 year, 2 1-year postdocs, that's very different than doing 2 3-year postdocs, right? And most universities cap the number of years you can be a postdoc, including ours, where you can only be a postdoc for 5 years. So those are things that you want to think about if you're endeavoring to do multiple postdocs. I see even more questions in the chat. Some of them are very specific. So you all can give your perspective. We do only have 10 minutes left, so I'm also going to be mindful of time. So I will say, the question is, should you negotiate your salary or benefits? Is there a difference between different postdoc positions in terms of salary? I can answer that real quick. Yes, there's a difference in postdoctoral salaries. That is also dependent on what kind of postdoc it is. And should you negotiate, you should try. That's what I would say. You should try if you can. There are some that you can't, right? If you're applying for a specific fellowship, most of those have a specific salary. So there's not much you can do. You might be able to negotiate if you need to move, or perhaps if you research funding, but those type are usually set and capped on the salary. Oh, yes.
Yeah, even though my postdoc wasn't NIH funded, they still said when I asked about salary that they set their postdocs to that cap. So even if, and I've heard that from multiple people across like the Postdoctoral Student Association, that's been the same. You started, I think right now it's like 55. It's or 50, depending on your background. So I think the cap is 55. And so I got the cap. And some people were like, you're getting 55. And so we were talking to each other. Some people were like, oh, you must have more background or experience. And so I would say it varies, but I do know the nationwide cap was 55 last year. So I don't know if it's changed.
For NIH funded or NIH type work, I will say we have a salary range. I think I can say that the minimum salary for postdocs on our campus, University of Maryland, which is a research one institution, is $36,000 is the minimum, and the maximum is $120,000. So there is quite a range. The median is $60,000 now. So that's usually in that space between the NIH and about $60,000.
Just for frame of reference, I've heard many government is between 70 and 80. My starting postdoc salary was 78.
Yeah, but
I have a question.
The price, I was gonna say the price is the salary also ranges between like also industries. So I'm a computer scientist. So like if I go to a postdoc at a big tech company, you get paid the same amount as like a full-time researcher. Same benefits. So it's 200 plus stock.
And I chose wrong. Okay.
Okay. Mohammed, did you have a additional question?
Yeah, no, that was my question. I just like had a comment. Like I've heard from different, like from all of you guys. So I'm assuming, like you are saying, I should search like the source of my funding and then ask for the highest cap, or like ask for more like for the like in the highest limits of my cap, like of my the highest value. Like if it
I
says from 40 to 60, for example, should I ask for 60 or something like that? Should I search the source of funding and then I can negotiate the salary, or how it should work?
I think I hate to say, I would say that it would be best to do an individual appointment, and we can kind of talk through and strategize like what the actual postdoc is, and then go from there. Does that work? Okay, great.
I see somebody asked about young AP and well-known university versus influential and less known.
Professor,
I don't know what's
yeah.
meant by influential. Does that mean they have a lot of research? They have a lot of research money?
I'm
just gonna say go where whoever has the foundation, the security versus the ranking or the.
I guess the question is like sort of like, so I did a postdoc at Cornell to work with a particular professor because if I apply for academic job, getting his letter recommendation opens is so like there's one end of like you could go, it all depends on what your end goal is. If your end goal is to go to a place, just because you don't know what you want to do, then you can go high, you can go wherever. You just need, you personally need a time to think about it, what you want to do next. But if you want to be in academia, then letters of recommendation hit universities before you even walk through the door. So if your mentor, if your postdoc mentor is well known, then they can open up a couple doors before you go, and those people can know about you. So that's what I did. So it really all depends on like what your end goal is, and you can like sort of like backtrack for where you want to go. A big university, a small university, a famous person, a less famous person, because maybe the small person has more time to actually mentor you, where the famous person doesn't have a lot of time, but he has a name, and that name could do something for you. So you really got to think about what you need and then work backwards.
And I really would encourage people to think about the fit of themselves into that particular lab, because sometimes it's attractive to go to somebody who is very well known, and that might not be the best fit for you, your skills, and maybe that relationship building. So really be mindful about not just going to somebody because they have high levels of funding or because they're well known, because oftentimes, as Dr. Brently just said, it doesn't mean that you're going to get that mentorship directly, and maybe that mentorship is not going to be as positive as you would like it to be. So really, really think and be interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, so you can see if that would be a good fit for you. I'm seeing a few more notes. It's coming quick now. We have 6 minutes left.
I would definitely recommend too asking the lab whether you can speak with their current or previous postdocs also. I think one of the postdocs I spoke to told me on the side about different culture, different things that I wouldn't get from the main PI, of course. Nothing bad, but just a different perspective.
And sometimes it is bad, so it's good to know that ahead of time. And oftentimes, individuals will have a list of the postdocs that they've had, like their past postdocs, on their website. It's not outlandish to go and try to contact those people and just saying, I'm very interested in the lab. What was your experience here? Or do you feel comfortable telling me about your experience? You will get a lot of great insight, as Dr. Toussaint said.
And just seeing where they are now. So you can see the different career pathways they took and say, what made you choose this route? Or, how did you tailor your experience in the lab to get to where you are? So it was really helpful for me to talk to past postdocs and see where they are now.
So we have 5 minutes left and just enough time for each of our panelists to say, let me see the exact question. Can you give one piece of career or job search advice for attendees today? And what is something that you wish you knew when you were graduating?
All right, y'all, I'll start again since I talk too much, but I would say my big thing that on the other side now was asking, should I bring my own research ideas and will that be encouraged, or am I expected to work on pre-existing projects and streams of funding?
Great. That's wonderful.
I guess I would have told myself to be kinder to myself while going through all of this. You're finishing a graduate degree. That's a huge accomplishment. And just be kind to yourself, because if you don't treat yourself kindly, no, why would you expect others to do that?
Great advice. And you just finished something huge. So like, be proud of yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like trying to think like what. So this is like, so like there's two ways to go about like towards the end of your PhD. Like oftentimes like yeah, like you get to like towards the end, you're like, I just learned how to be a PhD student. Like I don't really know, like I don't really know what I want to do. I just figured this part out. Like, why do I want to transition? It's great. Like life is great. Like I'm like in the swing of things. And for me, like towards my end of my PhD, so they're like, there's me and then there's like a friend of mine. So there was like a fellowship, there was a bunch of fellowships that came through and I just like applied for them. I found people, I applied for them and I was like, I'm going to go do this. And I had the opposite problem of most PhD students where you're like stressing about what you want to do next. I was stressing about like trying to finish because my fellowship had a deadline to start. But what my friend did and what the advice I would say that what he did is probably you probably don't want to do is that he spent so long planning what he was ready to do next that he forgot to finish what he needed to finish now. So his PhD dragged for an additional year because he was scared about taking the next step. And oftentimes, if you spend a lot of time planning, then you forget to just, just take a leap. Just like you can't plan out everything. Sometimes you just gotta like plan one step, you take a step and you see how it goes. But if you wait too long, then now you're like that place so well planned out that like you just stalled on something that you already finished. Like he's been done for a long time, but he spent a very long time planning his next steps so thoroughly that he just stalled his graduation. So like, don't do that. Like, no, like you can make a bunch of decisions and all decisions will lead you to the right place because there are pros and cons. Like a good decision, you may learn something from it, or it may not work out. But both avenues are okay because you learn what you want to do and what you didn't want to do. So don't stall. Like I'm not saying do what I did because I just like found some stuff and I took it and I jumped. I'm like, I should have like waited just a little bit, but I just jumped and my friend stalled. And like, he's still stalling and he should have graduated a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, but he's still stalling. So don't stall. Like jump if you don't know what to do and then you'll figure it out. Like you figured your PhD out, you'll figure the next step out.
Yeah, yes, a good dissertation is a done dissertation. That is often said. So thank you, Kiante. And Dr. Patange. Oh, I can't hear you for some reason. But it doesn't look like you're muted.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So my advice is career advice for once you get your next job, because you will graduate. You are going to get another job after this, right? So my advice is that the hybrid workplace is here to stay, right? So make sure to introduce yourself early to people, both in person and virtual, because what I've noticed in my postdoc is that it's very easy to get isolated to just the people you directly interact with for your work. So, and if you let too much time pass, it's going to get really awkward because you're going to be surrounded by people and you won't have established those contacts early on. So keep your microphone on early in the meetings. If you're new, make sure that the person hosting the meeting introduces you if it's virtual, and just make sure to introduce yourself to everyone that you see in your hallway, in your lab spaces, even if you don't directly work with them. So introduce yourself early. That's my piece of advice.
That is such great advice. Thank you, each and every one of you, for all of the advice that you've given. We have all of their contact information on, well, not all of it, but we have a form of contact information for each of our panelists on our website. So hopefully they're open to having people contact them. Yes, they're all on LinkedIn, so they are open. And we just want to thank you so much for being with us for these past 5 days, or maybe just today. We definitely appreciate the time and energy that has gone into this, both by our panelists as well as our audience members. So thank you. Susan?
Thank you so much. Blessing, you did such a great job moderating. And I always say this, the universe puts the right panelists together. The energy on this panel was superb, and your advice included all of the things that aren't always said by advisors when they're encouraging postdocs. Thanks for telling the real story. It's so appreciated.
I hope everybody has a lovely weekend. Do something good for yourself. And we will see you hopefully at another workshop.
Right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.